The mansion was too quiet that night. Jeju Shin sat alone in his study, a glass of wine untouched in his hand. His wife had just left the room, smiling, as always. Then, "Sir." He turned. It was the nanny. She never spoke unless spoken to. Never. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Your wife is not who you think she is." Jeju frowned. "What did you just say?" Zuri stepped closer, her eyes trembling with something deeper than fear. "If you don't find out the truth tonight, it may be too late." And just like that, everything he thought he knew about his life began to fall apart. If you are the kind of person who loves a story full of secrets, betrayal, and a love that was never supposed to happen, then stay right here. Because this story is for you. Welcome to Afro Korean Love Tales. And today's story is called, The Nanny Who Knew Too Much. The nanny had been silent for years, until the day she finally told the boss the truth about his wife. Zuri Achieng had not come to Jeju Island looking for trouble. She had come looking for peace. Back home in Nairobi, Kenya, life had not been kind to her. She had grown up watching her mother work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. She had studied hard, dreamed big, and believed, the way only the young and hopeful can believe, that the world would reward her for it. But the world, as it turned out, had other plans. At 28, Zuri had lost her mother to illness, her savings to medical bills, and her fiancé to a woman with a lighter spirit and fewer burdens. She had stood at the edge of everything she had built and watched it crumble quietly, the way old walls do, not with a crash, but with a slow, tired surrender. A friend had told her about the opportunity in Korea. A wealthy family on Jeju Island was looking for a live-in nanny. The pay was generous. The house was beautiful. And most importantly, it was far. Far from Nairobi. Far from the memories. Far from the version of herself she no longer recognized. Zuri had packed one suitcase, said goodbye to nobody in particular, and boarded a plane. She arrived on Jeju Island on a cool Tuesday morning in October. The air smelled like salt and pine. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue that reminded her of nothing she had ever seen before. She stood outside the arrival terminal with her suitcase and her directions and told herself, "This is a new chapter. You are allowed to start over." The Shin residence was everything the photographs had promised and more. It sat on a private hill overlooking the sea, a modern architectural dream of glass and stone and sweeping terraces. There were manicured gardens, a reflecting pool, and a silence so complete it felt almost sacred. The housekeeper, a small, efficient woman named Mrs. O, had met Zuri at the gate with a polite nod and a list of house rules so long it took 10 minutes to read aloud. No personal calls in common areas. No guests. No discussion of family matters outside the house. Meals were at fixed times. The child, a 6-year-old boy named Gino, was not to be spoiled, overstimulated, or taken beyond the garden without prior approval. Zuri had listened carefully, nodded at all the right moments, and thought to herself, "I have survived worse than a list of rules." Gino Shin was a quiet child with his father's dark eyes and a seriousness about him that did not belong on a 6-year-old face. He did not run to greet her the way some children did. He stood in the doorway of the playroom and looked at her with the careful, measuring gaze of someone who had learned early that not everyone who came into his life was going to stay. Zuri had knelt down to his level and said, very simply, "Hello, Gino. My name is Zuri. It means beautiful in Swahili. Do you know where Swahili comes from?" The boy had shaken his head. "Kenya," she said. "It's a country in Africa, very far from here. They have lions there. Real ones." Something shifted behind his eyes. Not quite a smile. But the beginning of one. "Lions," he said. "Lions," she confirmed. "And elephants. And a sky so big at night you can see every single star." By the end of the first week, Jino had decided that Zuri was, perhaps, acceptable. By the end of the second, he was following her around the garden like a small, quiet shadow. Jeju Shin was not what Zuri had expected. She had expected, based on the house, the staff, the sheer scale of everything, a cold man. An indifferent one. The kind of wealthy Korean businessmen she had seen in dramas, all sharp suits and sharp words and a heart sealed so tightly behind success that nothing soft could get through. What she found instead was a man who looked tired. Not physically tired, though there was that too, in the shadows beneath his eyes and the set of his shoulders. But tired in a deeper way. The way a person looks when they have been pretending for a very long time and the pretending has cost them something they cannot name. He was tall, lean, somewhere in his late 30s, with a face that might have been handsome if it ever fully relaxed. He spoke to his staff with courtesy. He read to Jino every night before bed without fail, even when he came home past midnight. And he looked at his wife, the beautiful, immaculate Seoyeon Shin, with eyes that Zuri could not quite read. Not cold. Not warm. Something in between. Something careful. Seoyeon Shin was the kind of woman who filled every room she entered. Not loudly, she was never loud, but completely. She was elegant in the particular way of women who have worked very hard to appear effortless. Her clothes were always perfect. Her hair was always perfect. Her smile, deployed at precisely the right moments, was perfect. She had welcomed Zuri with that smile on the first day, taken her hands in both of hers, and said, "We are so glad you are here. Jino needs consistency. Stability. We trust you will provide that." It had sounded like a welcome. It had felt, somehow, like a warning. Zuri had smiled back and said, "Of course, ma'am." And she had told herself, "Stay in your lane. Do your job. Take care of the child. Go home in a year with enough money to start again. Do not get involved in whatever this family is carrying. It is not your burden." She had told herself that. Clearly. Firmly. But secrets, she would learn, have a way of finding the people who are paying attention. And Zuri Achieng had always been paying attention. It started small. The way things always do. A phone call Seoyeon took in the garden, her voice dropping to almost nothing the moment she realized Zuri was nearby. The way she sometimes left the house in the early afternoons, always with a reason that was just slightly too specific, a spa appointment, a lunch with a friend whose name changed each time, a gallery opening that never appeared on any calendar. Zuri noticed. She said nothing. It was not her business. Then one evening, about 6 weeks into her time at the Shin residence, she was putting Jino to bed when the boy said something that stopped her cold. "Zuri," he said, his voice very small in the dark, "does my mother love my father?" Zuri had gone very still. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" she said carefully. Jino was quiet for a long moment. "Because," he said finally, "she talks to the other man like she loves him. And she talks to my father like she's acting." Zuri had tucked the blanket around him, kissed his forehead, and said, very gently, "Sometimes grown-ups are complicated. But your father loves you very much. And that is what matters most right now." She had turned off the light and walked out of the room. And stood in the hallway for a long time, her heart beating with something she did not want to name. If you're watching this and you're already feeling something in your chest, good. That means this story is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Drop a comment right now and tell us, where are you watching from? We have viewers joining us from all across the world and we love to see you. Drop your city or your country below. And if you're already hooked on this story, type the word truth in the comments. Let's see how many of you are with us tonight. Because the truth, the real truth, was only just beginning to surface. Zuri told herself she had imagined it. Children said things. Odd things. Things they overheard and misunderstood and pieced together in ways that made no sense to adult ears. Jino was 6 years old. He was perceptive, yes, unusually so, but he was still a child. He did not fully understand what he had seen or heard. He could not. That was what Zuri told herself as she lay in her small but comfortable room on the east wing of the mansion, listening to the sea wind move through the pine trees outside her window. She told herself this firmly, the way you tell yourself something you are not entirely sure you believe. She had not come here to get involved. She had come here to heal. To save money. To disappear quietly into someone else's routine until she was strong enough to build her own again. That was the agreement she had made with herself on that plane from Nairobi. Stay invisible. Stay useful. Stay out of it. But the words kept coming back. She talks to the other man like she loves him. Zuri squeezed her eyes shut and turned over in bed. It was not her business. The following weeks passed in the careful rhythm of the household. Zuri took Jino to his lessons, supervised his meals, read to him in both English and the few words of Swahili she was slowly teaching him. He was picking them up faster than she expected. Pole pole, she would say, slowly, slowly, and he would repeat it back to her with his small serious face and the ghost of a smile he was learning, gradually, to let through. Jiho noticed. One evening he came home earlier than usual and found them in the garden, Zuri teaching Jino to count to 10 in Swahili while they sorted stones by color along the garden path. He stood at the terrace door for a moment, watching, and when Zuri looked up and saw him she started to rise. "Don't stop," he said quietly. "Please." So she continued, and Jiho sat on the terrace steps in his work clothes and listened to his son count moja, mbilai, tattoo, Nanny, Tano with the focused intensity of a child learning something that felt, to him, like a secret language. And for the first time since Zuri had arrived at the Shin residence, she saw Jiho Shin smile. Not the polite, performative version he wore in his wife's presence. A real one. Small and unguarded and gone almost as soon as it appeared. It did something to her that she immediately decided to ignore. Sioyan was away that night. Another dinner. Another engagement. Zuri had prepared Jino's bath and his bedtime story and was tidying the playroom when she heard Jiho's voice from the kitchen, unhurried and low, talking to Mrs. O about something. Then Mrs. O left for the evening and the house went quiet again. Zuri was almost done for the night when she passed the kitchen and found Jiho standing at the counter, still in his work shirt, sleeves rolled up, attempting to make ramen from a packet with the careful concentration of a man who did not do this often. She stopped in the doorway. He looked up. There was a beat of silence. "I cannot find the pot," he said. Zuri pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. "Second cabinet. Left side." He found it, filled it with water, set it on the stove. Then he looked at the packet in his hand with a slight frown, as though it had personally offended him. "Would you like me to?" Zuri began. "No," he said. Then, after a pause, "Yes. Please." She made the ramen. He sat at the kitchen island and watched her with the quiet attention she was beginning to recognize as simply the way he existed in a room, present, observant, saying less than he was thinking. "You are good with Jino," he said. "He is easy to be good with," she replied. "He just needs someone to be consistent." Jiho was quiet for a moment. "He doesn't open up easily. To people." "I know," Zuri said. "Neither do I." She set the bowl in front of him and turned to leave. "Zuri." She stopped. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for tonight." She nodded once and went to her room. And lay awake for a long time, telling herself, very firmly, that she was not feeling anything. That this was a job. That this man was married. That whatever was happening in this house was not her story to be part of. She believed about half of it. The truth came to her not in a dramatic moment but in the way most life-changing truths arrive, quietly, by accident, on an ordinary afternoon. It was a Saturday. Seoyeon had taken the car into town. Jino was napping. The house was still. Zuri was in the laundry room folding clothes when she realized she had left her phone in the sitting room. She walked back through the corridor, past the closed door of Seoyeon's private dressing room, and that was when she heard it. A voice. Low, intimate, unmistakable in its warmth. Seoyeon's voice. Zuri would have kept walking. She truly would have. Except that she caught, in the slice of space where the door had not fully latched, a single sentence. He still doesn't know. And he won't. Not if we move carefully. Zuri stopped breathing. There was a pause. The voice on the other end of the call, a man's voice, too faint to make out words, said something. And Seoyeon laughed. Low and private and full of a tenderness Zuri had never once heard her use with Jiho. Soon, Seoyeon said. I promise you. Soon. Zuri walked back to the laundry room. She sat down on the small stool in the corner. She put her hands flat on her knees and breathed. She had not imagined it. Jino had not imagined it. Something was happening in this house. Something that Jiho Shin did not know about. And whatever it was being planned. Deliberately. Carefully. With a timeline. Soon. Zuri sat with that word for a long time. She thought about her mother, who had always said, the woman who sees trouble coming and says nothing is as guilty as the one who caused it. She thought about Jino, with his two serious eyes and his question in the dark. She thought about Jiho at the kitchen counter, rolling up his sleeves, unable to find the pot. And she thought, what exactly does soon mean? What was Seoyeon planning? Because there was a difference, Zuri knew, between a wife who was having an affair and a wife who was making plans. Affairs were about feeling. Plans were about outcome. And the word soon, spoken in that voice, with that certainty, did not sound like a woman tangled up in her emotions. It sounded like a woman who had already made a decision. Zuri did not sleep well that night. Or the night after. She went about her days with the same calm efficiency, the same warmth with Jino, the same quiet professionalism around the rest of the household. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She answered when she was spoken to. She gave nothing away. But she was watching now. Carefully. The way her mother had taught her to watch, not with suspicion, but with attention. There is a difference, her mother used to say. Suspicion makes you see what you fear. Attention makes you see what is actually there. What was actually there was this. Seoyeon made 3 calls a week from her private dressing room, always between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, always when the house was at its quietest. She had recently begun moving money. Zuri had seen, quite by accident, a transfer notification on a tablet left open on the kitchen counter. A significant amount. To an account she did not recognize. She had also, in the past 2 weeks, twice asked Mrs. O very casually about Jiho's schedule. Not in the way of a wife coordinating a shared life. In the way of someone who needed to know when someone would not be home. None of it was proof of anything. Not on its own. But together, the calls, the money, the careful questions about timing, it painted a picture that turned Zuri's stomach. And then one morning Jino came to breakfast with a drawing he had made the night before. He pushed it across the table to Zuri without a word, the way he sometimes did when he wanted to say something he didn't have the language for yet. It was a drawing of a house. And 2 figures outside it, a tall man and a small boy. Walking away from it together. No woman in the picture. Zuri looked at the drawing for a long time. Did you dream this? She asked gently. Jino shrugged. Mama said we might go on a long trip soon, he said. Me and her. Without Appa. The word landed like a stone in still water. Without appa. Zuri folded the drawing carefully and put it in her pocket. That evening, when the house was quiet and Jeju was in his study, she stood outside his door for 4 full minutes before she knocked. He looked up from his desk, surprised. She was never here at this hour. She never came to him. "Sir," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. "Zuri? Is everything all right? Is Jino?" "Jino is fine," she said. "He's asleep." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "There is something I need to tell you," she said. "And I need you to hear all of it before you react. Because I have been trying to decide whether to say anything for weeks now. And I've decided that staying silent is no longer something I'm able to do." Jeju set down his pen. His face had gone very still. "What is it?" he said quietly. Zuri took a breath. And told him everything. "Now if you are watching this and your heart is already racing, good. Because this story is just getting started. And we want to know, are you Team Zuri? Do you think she did the right thing by speaking up? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. And if you're watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, or anywhere else in the world, tell us where you are. We love our Afro-Korean Love Tales family and we want to hear from every single one of you. Type truth in the comments if you are still with us. We see you. Now let's keep going. Jeju Shin did not speak for a long time after Zuri finished. She had told him everything. The phone calls from the dressing room. The money transfer she had seen on the tablet. The careful questions Seoyeon had been asking Mrs. O about his schedule. And finally, the thing that had made her knock on his door tonight, what Jino had said at breakfast. The drawing. The trip. Without appa. She had laid it all out quietly and clearly, the way her mother had taught her to speak when the thing you are saying matters, no drama, no embellishment, just the truth in its plainest form, because the truth, spoken plainly, is always enough. When she finished, the room was very still. Jeju was sitting with his elbows on the desk and his hands clasped in front of his face, looking at a point somewhere between the desk and the wall. His expression was unreadable. Not blank, she could see the effort it was taking him to hold it together, but controlled in the way of a man who had spent a lifetime making sure nothing showed on his face that he had not chosen to put there. Zuri waited. "How long," he said finally, "have you been watching this?" "I have not been watching," she said carefully. "I have been noticing. There is a difference." He looked at her then. Really looked at her. As though he was seeing her, not the nanny, not the staff, not the quiet woman who made ramen and taught his son Swahili, but her. The person underneath all of that. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. His voice was even. "You could have stayed out of it. Most people would have." "I know," Zuri said. "I almost did." "What changed?" She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and placed Gino's drawing on the desk between them. The house. The two figures. The tall man and the small boy. Walking away together. No woman in the picture. Jeju looked at the drawing for a long time. Something moved across his face. Fast, like a shadow crossing water. And then it was gone. "He drew this himself," he said. "This morning," Zuri said. "Before breakfast. He told me your wife mentioned a long trip. Just the two of them. Without you." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Heavier. The kind that comes when a person is not processing new information but recognizing something they have known for a long time and have been working very hard not to look at directly. "I see," Jeju said. That was all he said. "I see." Zuri stood. "I am sorry," she said. "I know this is not easy to hear. And I want you to know, I am not telling you this to cause trouble. I am telling you because Jino loves you. And because whatever is being planned in this house, it involves him. And he does not deserve to be caught in the middle of something he does not understand. Jiho nodded once. His jaw was tight. Thank you, Zuri, he said. His voice was quiet but certain. The voice of a man who has just made a decision he cannot unmake. You can go to bed. I will handle this. She left his study and walked back to her room. She did not sleep at all that night. Neither, she suspected, did he. The next morning everything looked the same. The house was the same. The breakfast table was set the same way. Mrs. O moved through the kitchen with her usual efficiency. Jino ate his toast and asked Zuri to teach him how to say elephant in Swahili. Tembo, she told him. He repeated it 3 times until he was satisfied. Sioyin came down at 8:30, immaculate as always, and poured herself coffee and asked Jiho something light about a dinner reservation for the following weekend. And Jiho answered her. Calmly. Normally. As though nothing had changed. But Zuri watched his hands as he turned the page of the newspaper he was reading. They were completely still. Too still. The hands of a man exercising enormous, deliberate control. Sioyin did not notice. She kissed Jino on the top of his head, reminded Mrs. O about the dry cleaning, and left the kitchen without a backwards glance. The moment she was gone, Jiho looked up from his newspaper and met Zuri's eyes across the table. Just for a second. And in that second she understood, he had not confronted Sioyin. Not yet. He was watching. He was gathering. He was doing exactly what Zuri had done for weeks, paying attention. She gave the smallest nod. He returned to his newspaper. Jino, oblivious to all of it, practiced saying tembo under his breath between bites of toast. Over the next several days, Jiho moved quietly and methodically. Zuri did not know the details, he did not share them with her and she did not ask. But she noticed the small signs. A private phone call taken in the car rather than the house. A meeting with a man she did not recognize, brief, at the gate, one evening just after dusk. A quiet conversation with a lawyer. She recognized the title on the business card she saw him slide into his jacket pocket one morning. He was building a picture. The way a careful man builds anything, slowly, thoroughly, making sure every piece is in place before he moves. Sioyin, for her part, continued as normal. Perhaps too normally. There was something performative about her ease these days, Zuri thought. Something slightly too smooth about the way she moved through the house. As though she too was playing a role, and had been for much longer than anyone realized. It was Mrs. O who gave Zuri the next piece of the puzzle. Entirely without meaning to. They were in the kitchen one afternoon, Mrs. O preparing the evening meal and Zuri making a snack for Jino, when Mrs. O said, in the distracted way of someone thinking out loud, I wonder why ma'am wants the house inventory done this week. We only just did it in January. Zuri kept her eyes on the fruit she was cutting. House inventory. All the valuables, Mrs. O said, frowning slightly. The artwork. The jewelry. The documents in the safe. She asked me to make a full list yesterday. Very specific about it. She shook her head. Unusual timing. Zuri said nothing. But her mind was working very fast. A full inventory of valuables. Specific. Documented. The kind of list a person makes when they are preparing to make a legal claim. The kind of list a person needs when they are planning to ensure that in any division of assets, they walk away with everything they are entitled to. Or more than they are entitled to. Zuri thought of the money transfer. The private calls. The trip without Appa. And now this. Sioyin was not just having an affair. Sioyin was preparing to leave. And she was preparing to take everything she could carry when she went. Including, it seemed, Jino. That evening Zuri knocked on Jiho's study door again. He opened it before she had finished knocking, as though he had been expecting her. "The inventory," she said. His eyes sharpened. "You know about it." Mrs. O mentioned it without realizing. "Jiho," she stopped. It was the first time she had used his name without the formal address. He noticed. She noticed that he noticed. But neither of them remarked on it. "This is moving faster than I think you realize. She is documenting assets. She has already moved money. Whatever she is planning, it is not weeks away. It may be days." Jiho looked at her steadily. "I know," he said. "I have been speaking to my lawyer. We are nearly ready." "Ready for what?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped back from the door. "Come in," he said. "I think it is time I told you what I have found." Zuri stepped inside. And what Jiho Shin told her in the next 40 minutes changed everything she thought she understood about the Shin household, about Seoyeon, about the marriage, about the quiet and careful sadness she had sensed in this house from the very first day she arrived. The man Seoyeon had been calling was not simply a lover. He was a business partner. And together, over the past 18 months, they had been systematically diverting funds from Jiho's company. Small amounts at first, the kind that disappear into the noise of a large operation without raising flags. Then larger. Always careful. Always just within the margins of what could be explained away. Until recently. Recently the amounts had grown. And the pattern, when laid out by Jiho's accountant, was unmistakable. Seoyeon had not married Jiho for love. She had married him for access. And she had spent 4 years of marriage patiently, methodically, positioning herself for the moment when she could walk away with enough to never need anyone again. Jiho had suspected something was wrong with the company accounts for months. He had not suspected his wife. Not fully. Not until Zuri had knocked on his door. He sat across from her now, this tired, careful man who had read to his son every night without fail and smiled at his wife's perfectly timed jokes and carried whatever it was he was carrying with such controlled quietness that nobody in the house had ever thought to ask him if he was all right. "How long have you known?" Zuri asked. "About the money, 3 weeks," he said. "About the rest," he paused. "Longer than I wanted to admit." Zuri looked at him. "I'm sorry," she said. And she meant it with every part of herself. He shook his head. "Don't be. You are the only person in this house who told me the truth." He looked at her with an expression she could not entirely name, gratitude, yes, and something older than gratitude, something that had been sitting underneath everything for weeks now, waiting for a moment honest enough to surface. "Do you know how rare that is?" Zuri did not answer. Because the truth was, she was no longer sure she could speak without her voice betraying something she had absolutely no business feeling. She stood up. "What will you do?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Jiho said, "I will do what I should have done a long time ago." And this time, Zuri believed him completely. "Are you still with us? Because if this story has you gripping your phone or your remote right now, you are exactly who this story was made for. Go ahead and drop a comment. Tell us, did you see this coming? Was Seoyeon exactly who you thought she was from the beginning? Type betrayal in the comments if you felt that one in your chest. And please, share this video with a friend who loves a good story. Because the Afro-Korean love tales family grows one shared video at a time. We are just getting to the good part. Stay with us. The next morning came in slowly over Jeju Island, the way mornings do in autumn, gray and soft and smelling of the sea, the light arriving without drama, as though it too was holding its breath. Zuri was up before anyone else. She made tea in the quiet kitchen and stood at the window watching the garden emerge from the dark, the pine trees taking shape, the reflecting pool catching the first pale silver of the sky. She had not slept much. Her mind had been too full. Too loud with everything she now knew and everything she suspected was about to happen. She thought about her mother again. She did that often in moments of uncertainty, reached back for her mother's voice the way you reach for something solid when the ground beneath you is uncertain. Her mother had been a woman of deep practicality and deeper faith, a woman who believed that the truth always finds its way to the surface eventually, the only question being whether you help it along or wait for it to arrive on its own. Zuri had helped it along. Now she could only wait. Jino came down at his usual time, dressed himself, and settled at the breakfast table with the quiet self-sufficiency that always made her heart ache a little. He was too self-sufficient for 6 years old. Too careful about not needing things. As though he had already learned, in his small careful way, that needing things too loudly was a risk. "Tembo," he said, by way of greeting. "Tembo," Zuri confirmed, setting his breakfast in front of him. "You remembered." "I remember everything," he said simply. And then, without looking up from his plate, "Is something happening today?" Zuri looked at him. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged his small shoulders. "Appa was awake very early. I heard him on the phone. And Mama is still in her room. She's always down by now." Zuri sat across from him. "Sometimes grown-ups have complicated days," she said carefully. "But whatever happens today, you are safe. I need you to know that. Whatever you hear or see today, you are safe and you are loved." Jino looked at her for a long moment with those dark, serious eyes. "Are you going to leave?" he asked. The question caught her completely off guard. She felt it land somewhere deep and unguarded. "Not today," she said honestly. "And not without saying goodbye. I promise you that." He considered this. Then he nodded once, the way his father nodded, that single decisive dip of the chin that meant the matter was settled, and returned to his breakfast. Zuri looked at this small, serious boy and felt something fierce and protective rise up in her chest that had nothing to do with her job description. She was still sitting with that feeling when Jiho came into the kitchen. He was dressed formally. Suit, tie, the full armor of a man who intended to be taken seriously today. But his face was different from yesterday. The careful blankness was gone. What was there instead was a clarity. A settledness. The look of a man who has made his peace with something difficult and is now simply walking toward it. He looked at Jino first. His whole expression softened. "Good morning, buddy," he said. "Good morning, Appa," Jino said. "Tembo means elephant." Jiho smiled. That real smile. Small and unguarded. "Is that so?" "Zuri taught me. She knows lots of words." Jiho looked at Zuri over his son's head. "Yes," he said quietly. "She does." Zuri stood and moved to the counter, giving her hands something to do. Seoyin came down 20 minutes later. She looked, as always, perfect. Hair done, clothes pressed, that particular brand of effortless elegance she wore like a second skin. She poured herself coffee, kissed Jino on the top of his head, and was halfway through a remark about the weather when Jiho said, in a voice that was very calm and very final. "Seoyin. We need to talk. Now." The kitchen went very still. Seoyin turned. She looked at Jiho. And in the half-second before she arranged her face into its usual composed expression, Zuri saw it, a flash of something. Not guilt, exactly. More like calculation. The rapid, invisible assessment of a woman who has been caught but is not yet ready to admit it. "Of course," Seoyin said smoothly. "Let me just." "Now," Jiho said again. Same tone. No louder. But absolute. Zuri stood up. "Jino," she said brightly, "shall we go and check on the garden? I think I saw a bird near the reflecting pool this morning." Jino looked between his parents once, with those careful eyes. Then he slid off his chair and took Zuri's hand. She walked him out to the garden and did not look back. She did not hear what was said in that kitchen. She had not expected to and had not tried to. That conversation belonged to Jeju. He had earned the right to have it in private. But she felt it. The way you feel a storm even when you cannot see it, in the air, in the pressure, in the way the world goes briefly, completely quiet. She sat with Jeju by the reflecting pool and taught him the Swahili word for water. Maji, she said. He repeated it carefully. Maji. She taught him sky, anga. She taught him strong, imara. Imara, Jeju said, turning the word over in his mouth. It means strong, Zuri told him. When things are hard, you say it to yourself. Imara. I am strong. Jeju looked at the water. Imara, he said quietly, to himself. Zuri looked away so he would not see her eyes. They were in the garden for nearly an hour before Mrs. O appeared at the terrace door and told Zuri, with an expression that gave nothing away, that Mr. Shin would like to speak with her. She would watch Jeju. Zuri found Jeju in the sitting room. Alone. Seoyeon was gone. Her car was no longer in the drive. Jeju was standing at the window with his back to the door, looking out at the sea. He turned when he heard her. He looked exhausted. But not broken. There is a difference, and Zuri knew it intimately, from her own life, between a person who is exhausted and a person who is broken. Exhaustion is what happens after you have done something hard. Broken is what happens when the hard thing defeats you. Jeju Shin did not look defeated. He looked like a man who had just set down something very heavy he had been carrying for a very long time. She didn't deny it, he said. Any of it? Zuri said nothing. She waited. The affair. The money. The plan to take Jeju and leave. He shook his head slightly. She sat there and told me she had been planning this for over a year. That she had never intended the marriage to be permanent. That she had been, those were her words, patient. The word landed in the room like something cold. Patient. She said it like it was something to be proud of, Jeju said. There was no anger in his voice. Just a kind of wondering disbelief. Like the patience itself was the accomplishment. What happens now? Zuri asked. My lawyer filed this morning. Freezing order on the diverted accounts. She will not be able to access that money. The custody matter will take longer, but my lawyer is confident, given what we have documented, that Jeju will stay with me. He paused. She has left the house. She has gone to stay with him. I don't imagine she will come back. Zuri absorbed this quietly. And Jeju, she said. Jeju's jaw tightened. I will tell him something age-appropriate. Something true but gentle. He is perceptive enough to know something has shifted. He deserves honesty. He looked at her directly. You told him he was safe this morning. It was not a question. He must have heard her, or Mrs. O had mentioned it. Yes, Zuri said simply. Thank you, he said. That was, he needed to hear that. From someone he trusts. There was a pause between them. The kind of pause that happens when two people are standing very close to something neither of them is quite ready to name yet. Zuri, Jeju said. His voice had changed. It was quieter now. Less formal. The voice he used with Jeju in the evenings. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you stay, he said. When you first started noticing things, you could have left. Found another position. Avoided all of this. You had no obligation to any of us. Zuri considered the question honestly. No, she said finally. I had no obligation. But obligation is not the only reason a person does the right thing. He looked at her. I stayed, she said, because Jino needed someone to stay. And because, she stopped. Chose her next words carefully. Because I know what it is to be in a house full of pretending. And I could not walk away from that. Not when I had the chance to do something about it. Jiho was quiet for a long moment. Where did you come from? He said softly. Not rhetorically. Genuinely. As though the answer might explain something he had been trying to understand for weeks. Kenya, she said. The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Kenya, he repeated. Like the word itself was worth something. And standing there in that sitting room, with the sea outside the window and the garden quiet behind them and Jino somewhere nearby learning the Swahili word for strong, Zuri felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt like herself. The real version. The one that existed before the grief and the loss and the long careful process of making herself small enough to fit into other people's spaces. She felt seen. And that, she knew from experience, was the most dangerous feeling in the world. Okay, we need to pause right here for a second. Because if this story is moving something in you, if you recognize something in Zuri, in Jiho, in the quiet courage it takes to tell the truth when staying silent would have been so much easier, then this one is for you. Drop a comment and tell us what you think is going to happen next. Are Zuri and Jiho going to find their way to each other? Or is it too complicated? Too soon? Tell us what you think. Type Zuri in the comments if you are rooting for Zuri. We want to hear from you. And if you have not already subscribed to Afro Korean Love Tales, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this one are what we do. Every single time. The weeks that followed were the quietest Zuri had ever known. Not the suffocating quiet of secrets and pretending that had filled the Shin residence before. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that comes after a storm has passed and the air is clean again and the world is figuring out what shape it wants to take now that the pressure has lifted. Seoyeon's absence reorganized the house in ways both visible and invisible. The formal dinner settings disappeared. The careful performance of the perfectly managed household softened into something more human. Mrs. O, freed from the exacting standards of a woman who had measured everything, began humming to herself in the kitchen in the mornings. The sitting room, previously arranged with the geometric precision of a showroom, developed the comfortable disorder of a space actually being lived in. Jino bloomed. That was the only word for it. The small, serious boy who had arrived in Zuri's care like a closed fist slowly, gradually, opened. He laughed more. He asked more questions. He began leaving his drawings not just on the breakfast table but all over the house, on the kitchen counter, on Zuri's pillow, once, memorably, slipped under the door of his father's study with a knock and quick retreating footsteps. Jiho had opened that particular drawing to find a picture of 3 figures standing in front of a house. A tall man. A small boy. And a woman with dark skin and a wide smile and what appeared to be a lion standing beside her. He had kept it in his desk drawer. Zuri did not know this. But Mrs. O did. And Mrs. O, who had worked in this house for 7 years and loved Jino like her own grandchild and had quietly despised Seoyeon for most of those 7 years, considered it the most hopeful thing she had seen in a very long time. For Zuri and Jiho, things moved slowly. Carefully. With the particular caution of 2 people who are both aware of the ground shifting beneath them and are both, for different reasons, not entirely sure they trust it. He began coming home earlier. Not always. Not every night. But often enough that it stopped being remarkable and became simply the rhythm of the house. He would find them in the garden or the playroom or the kitchen and he would join them, loosening his tie, rolling up his sleeves, sitting on the floor with Jino's building blocks or standing at the counter while Zuri cooked and asking questions about Kenya in that attentive, unhurried way of his. She told him about Nairobi. About the way the city smelled in the early morning, like smoke and rain and something green underneath. About her mother's kitchen, small and warm and always producing more food than should have been possible given what they had. About the night sky over the Rift Valley, which she had seen once on a school trip and never forgotten, the stars so dense and close it felt like the sky itself was leaning down toward you. He listened the way he did everything, completely. Without interruption. With the quality of attention that made you feel, while you were speaking, that what you were saying was the most important thing in the room. In return he told her things she suspected he told very few people. He told her about growing up the only son of a man who had built a business empire from nothing and handed it to his son with the unspoken expectation that it would be doubled. About the particular loneliness of being the person everyone needed to be strong. About marrying Seoyeon at 32 because she was brilliant and beautiful and because he had been, he admitted quietly, too tired by then to examine his reasons too carefully. "I think I knew," he said one evening. They were in the kitchen after Jino had gone to bed, the remains of the dinner they had cooked together between them on the counter. "Not about the money. Not the specifics. But I knew something was constructed. About her. About us." He turned his glass slowly in his hands. "I just didn't want to look at it. Because looking at it meant deciding what to do about it," Zuri said. He looked at her. "Yes. Exactly that. I understand that," she said. "More than you know. Your fiancé," he said quietly. She had mentioned him once, briefly, in passing. She was surprised he had held on to it. "Yes," she said. "What happened?" She was quiet for a moment. "He decided I was too heavy," she said simply. "Not physically. Just as a person. After my mother died. He said I had changed." She paused. "He wasn't wrong. I had changed. Grief changes you. But I thought love was supposed to be able to hold the changed version of you. Not just the easy one." Jiho was very still. "He was a fool," he said. Low and certain, with a quiet conviction that was not anger but something older and more absolute than anger. Zuri looked at him. He was looking back at her with an expression that had stopped trying to be careful. The air between them shifted. Zuri stood up. Collected her glass. Moved to the counter with her back to him, giving herself a moment, giving them both a moment, because she was not ready. Not yet. There were still too many things unresolved, the divorce proceedings, the custody arrangement, the rawness of everything that had just happened in this house. And she was still, at the end of every day, the nanny. She was still an employee. She was still a woman who had come here to heal her own life, not to step into the middle of someone else's. She turned back. "It's late," she said gently. He nodded. He understood. He was, she had learned, a man who understood without needing things spelled out. "Good night, Zuri," he said. "Good night, Jiho." She went to her room and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark. And told herself, be careful. Be very, very careful. Not because what you are feeling is wrong. But because you are both still healing. And healing people can mistake warmth for rescue, and rescue for love, and that particular confusion never ends well for anyone. She told herself all of this clearly and firmly. And then she lay down and looked at the ceiling and thought about the way he had said, he was a fool, with that quiet certainty, as though it was simply a fact about the universe that he was stating for the record. And she smiled in the dark, alone, where nobody could see it. A month passed. Then 6 weeks. The divorce moved through its legal stages with the grim efficiency of these things when the evidence is overwhelming and one party has decided not to fight. Seoyeon, it emerged, had retained a lawyer of her own and was negotiating, not for custody of Jino, as Jiho had feared, but for a financial settlement. She had, apparently, recalculated her position and decided that a clean exit with what she could legitimately claim was preferable to a protracted battle she would not win. Jiho told Zuri this on a Tuesday morning with the same controlled steadiness he brought to everything. Jino stays with me, he said. That was non-negotiable. She accepted it. Zuri released a breath she had not known she was holding. He'll have questions, she said. As he gets older. I know, Jeju said. I will answer them honestly. When he is ready to ask them. He paused. I spoke to a child psychologist. She recommended consistency. Routine. Familiar relationships. He looked at Zuri steadily. She said the most important thing for a child going through family disruption is knowing that the people who love him are not going anywhere. Zuri met his eyes. I am not going anywhere, she said quietly. And meant it in more ways than she examined out loud. Something settled between them in that moment. Not named. Not rushed. But real. Jino, for his part, was processing everything in his characteristic way, quietly, internally, occasionally releasing small pieces of it in the form of questions that arrived without warning and deserved honest answers. One afternoon he asked Zuri, while they were doing a puzzle together on the sitting room floor, "Is Mama coming back?" Zuri set down her puzzle piece. "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "Mama is going to live somewhere else from now on. But she is still your mama. That does not change." Jino fitted a piece into the puzzle. Considered this. "Are you going to live somewhere else?" he asked. "Not right now," Zuri said. "But maybe later?" She looked at this small boy, this careful, perceptive, quietly courageous child, and thought about what it meant to tell the truth to someone who needed it most. "I don't want to," she said honestly. "This feels like home to me now." You feel like someone I was supposed to find." Jino looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up her hand and placed it on top of his puzzle piece and said, "Help me with this part. It's the hard part." Zuri laughed. Softly. From somewhere real. "Okay," she said. "Let's do the hard part together." And that was how Jeju found them 20 minutes later when he came home, unexpectedly early, still in his coat, stopping in the doorway of the sitting room with his briefcase in his hand, Zuri and Jino on the floor together, heads bent over a puzzle, Jino talking rapidly about something and Zuri laughing, and the whole room full of a warmth so natural and unperformed that Jeju stood there for a full minute before either of them noticed him. When Jino looked up and saw his father, his whole face opened. "Appa." Zuri said, "The hard part is always worth doing." Jeju looked from his son to Zuri. Zuri looked back at him. "She's right," Jeju said softly. "The hard part always is." And the way he said it, looking at her, only at her, with everything he had stopped trying to hide in his expression, made Zuri's breath catch in a way she did not try to explain away this time. She just let it be what it was. Now listen, if you have made it this far in this story, you are a true member of the Afro-Korean Love Tales family, and we see you. We really do. Drop a comment right now and tell us, are you happy with how things are developing between Zuri and Jeju? Do you think they deserve each other? And we want to know, has this story reminded you of anything in your own life? A moment when someone told you the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet? Share it in the comments. Your stories matter to us. Type Jeju in the comments if this episode moved you. And please share this video with someone you love. Because good stories are meant to be shared. We are almost at the end. Stay with us for the final chapter. The confession, when it finally came, did not happen the way Zuri had imagined it. She had imagined, on the nights when she allowed herself to imagine it at all, something formal. Something with clear edges. A conversation with a beginning and a middle and an end, the kind where both people know exactly what is being said and what it means and what comes next. What actually happened was a Sunday morning in late November. Jeju Island in November is a different creature from Jeju Island in October. The tourists have thinned. The roads are quieter. The volcanic landscape turns a deep, aching rust and gold, and the sea goes a shade of gray-green that is somehow more beautiful than the summer blue, because it is honest. It is the sea not performing for anyone. Just being exactly what it is. Jeju had suggested a walk. The three of them. Down to the coastal path that wound along the cliff edge south of the estate, through the Haenyeo village where the island's famous women divers had worked for generations, down to the black lava rock beach at the bottom where the waves came in slow and heavy and the wind smelled like the very edge of the world. Jeju had run ahead the way children do when they are given space, with the total physical commitment of someone who has been indoors too long, his small figure moving fast along the path, stopping to crouch over a tide pool, moving again, turning back to shout something to Zuri and Jeju that the wind took before it reached them. They walked side by side. Not touching. But close. The comfortable closeness of people who have stopped needing to perform distance. He is happy, Jeju said. Yes, Zuri agreed. He really is. You did that. She shook her head. You did that. By staying present. By choosing him every day even when everything else was falling apart. Children feel that. It goes into them and stays. Jeju was quiet for a moment. My father was not present, he said. He was, there. In the house. But not present. I swore when Jeju was born that I would be different. He paused. I am not sure I always succeeded. You're succeeding now, Zuri said simply. He looked at her sideways. The wind was pulling at her hair and she had her hands in her coat pockets and her face was turned slightly into the sea and she looked like someone who belonged here. On this island. In this particular gray-green November light. Like the island itself had been waiting for her and had simply not said so until now. Zuri, he said. I need to say something to you and I need you to let me finish before you respond. She turned to look at him. His expression was serious but not anxious. The expression of a man who has thought carefully about what he is about to say and has decided it is worth the risk of saying it. Okay, she said. He took a breath. When you knocked on my door that first night, he said, and told me what you had seen, I was not surprised by what you told me. Not really. I was surprised that you told me. That you chose to. That you looked at a situation that was not your problem and decided it was your responsibility anyway. He paused. I have been thinking about why you did that ever since. And I think you did it because you are the kind of person who cannot look away from something that is wrong. Not because it is comfortable. Not because it is safe. But because something in you will not allow it. Zuri said nothing. She had promised to let him finish. In the months since then, Jeju continued, I have watched you with my son. I have watched you in this house. I have watched you be patient and honest and funny and fierce and tender and completely, entirely yourself in a way that I have not seen, that I did not know was possible, to be in a shared space with another person. His voice was steady but there was something underneath it. Something that had been very carefully contained for a very long time and was now, gently, being released. And I have fallen in love with you. I want you to know that. Not as an employer. Not with any expectation or pressure. Just, as a fact about my life. The way Kenya is a fact. The way Jeju is a fact. You have become a fact about my life, Zuri Achieng, and I thought you deserved to know it. The wind moved through the grass along the cliff edge. Down the path, Jeju was crouched over a tide pool, completely absorbed. Zuri looked at the sea for a long moment. Then she looked at Jeju. I made a rule for myself when I came here, she said. I told myself, do your job, heal your wounds, save your money, and go home. Don't get involved. Don't feel anything complicated. Don't let this become something it was never supposed to be. Jeju nodded carefully. And, he said. And, Zuri said, I broke every single one of those rules. Somewhere between the ramen and the Swahili lessons and a man who cannot find his own pot. Her voice was soft. I broke all of them. He was very still. I love you too, she said. Quietly. Simply. The way she said important things, without decoration, without hesitation, just the truth in its plainest form, because the truth, spoken plainly, is always enough. I have been trying not to for months. I have been very disciplined about it. I have been giving myself very sensible lectures at night. She paused. None of it worked. Jeju let out a breath that sounded like something releasing. And then he did something that was so like him it made her heart ache with recognition. He did not reach for her dramatically. He did not say anything more. He simply reached out and took her hand. Gently. Steadily. The way he did everything. And held it. She held it back. Down the path, Jeju stood up from his tide pool and turned and saw them. Saw his father and his Zuri standing on the cliff path above the black lava beach, holding hands, looking at the sea. He looked at them for a moment. Then he turned back to his tide pool. But not before Zuri saw it, even from that distance, even with the wind and the light between them. He was smiling. Not the beginning of a smile. A real one. Wide and unguarded and entirely his own. The smile of a child who has been waiting, in his small careful way, for the world to make sense again. Imara, Zuri thought. We made it through the hard part. The months that followed were not without difficulty. They never are, when the hard part is truly behind you and the real work of building something begins. There were days when Jeju's grief over the marriage, not for Seoyeon herself but for the version of his life he had believed in, surfaced in ways that required patience and space. There were days when Zuri's own old wounds made her pull back, go quiet, retreat into the careful self-sufficiency that had kept her safe for so long. On those days they had learned to give each other room. Not distance, room. There is a difference. Distance says I am closing myself off from you. Room says I trust you enough to need space sometimes and I trust you will still be here when I come back. They were still learning the difference. But they were learning it together. Jeju continued to bloom. His psychologist noted, at his 3-month review, that he was showing remarkable emotional resilience for a child his age. Jeju had smiled at that and said nothing. Zuri knew what he was thinking. Resilience is not a quality that appears from nowhere. It is grown, slowly, in the soil of consistent love. Jeju had good soil now. On the evening of the 1st of December, with Jeju Island settling into its winter quiet and the pine trees outside the mansion moving in the night wind, Jeju asked Zuri to teach him something new in Swahili. What do you want to learn? She asked, tucking his blanket around him. He thought about it very seriously. How do you say family? He asked. Zuri looked at this boy. This small, serious, quietly courageous boy who had drawn pictures of 3 figures standing in front of a house and slipped them under doors and asked questions in the dark that the adults around him had needed to hear. Familia, she said softly. In Swahili, family is familia. Jeju repeated it carefully. Familia. That's it, Zuri said. You've got it. Familia, he said again. Tasting it. Satisfied. Then he looked up at her with those dark eyes that missed nothing. Zuri, he said, are you our familia now? Zuri felt the question fill the room. Fill her chest. Fill all the spaces inside her that had been empty for so long she had stopped noticing the emptiness. She leaned down and pressed her lips to his forehead. Yes, she whispered. I think I am. He closed his eyes. She turned off the light. And in the hallway, she found Jeju leaning against the wall outside Jeju's door, his arms folded, his eyes soft. He had heard. He looked at her and said nothing. She walked to him and leaned against the wall beside him and they stood there together in the quiet hallway of the house above the sea, listening to the wind and the distant waves and the small steady breathing of a child who had found his way to safe ground. And Zuri thought, this is what I came to Jeju Island for. Not the job. Not the money. Not the escape. This exact moment. This man beside her. This child behind the door. This life that had found her when she had stopped looking for it. Home, she thought. After everything. Home. Because that is what this story has always been about. Not just betrayal uncovered or secrets revealed or justice quietly served, though all of those things happened here. This story has always been about what waits for you on the other side of your hardest chapter. About the truth that takes courage to tell. About the love that comes not when you are at your easiest or your brightest or your most together, but when you are real. When you are exactly, imperfectly, beautifully yourself. Zuri Achieng came to Jeju Island to disappear. Instead she was found. And so was Jeju Shin. And so, in the quiet, unhurried way of children who understand more than we give them credit for, was Jino. Familia. All three of them. Together. And that is where we leave them. And that is a wrap on today's story here on Afro-Korean Love Tales. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, please let us know in the comments. Tell us your favorite moment. Tell us which character you saw yourself in. Was it Zuri, who kept going even when everything was hard? Was it Jeju, who had the courage to face the truth? Or was it Jino, that small, serious, wonderful boy who just wanted his familia to be whole? Drop your answer below. And if you are watching from the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, or anywhere else in this beautiful world, tell us where you are. We love knowing where our Afro-Korean Love Tales family is watching from. If this story blessed you today, share it. Send it to a friend who needs a good story. Post it. Because stories like this one only grow when good people pass them on. And before you go, hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Because we have more stories coming. More love. More truth. More of the stories that remind us, no matter where we come from, no matter what we have been through, love finds a way. It always does. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being part of this family. This is Afro-Korean Love Tales. And we will see you in the next story.